Welcome to the Excel Pod. Welcome to the Untied Podcast, where we unravel the knots of life with faith, wisdom, and encouragement. Because together we're here to untie from tradition and embrace truth through powerful Bible teaching. My name is Garrett Bernethy. I'm one of the hosts of the show, along with my very good friend Corey Sawyers. And today we're coming to you with yet another episode of Untied, as we are looking at the Sermon on the Mount this season. It's been a great study so far, and today is not going to disappoint, as we have some great stuff to discuss from the words of Jesus, as we're looking at the topics of anger and lust in Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 down through verse 32. So excited to get for this discussion and for all the discussion that we've had. And if you're tuning in with us for the first time, be sure to go back into the first episodes of the season, and you'll be able to get caught up pretty quick with the things that we have discussed and studied. It's been a great study so far, and we're glad that you have joined us for it. As always, we hope that you will like, share, follow, and subscribe to this podcast, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on your favorite podcasting platform, or just go right to our website, excelstomore.net, go to the Excel Pod Network, and you can like our podcast there, along with all the other podcasts on the Excel Pod Network that we're very excited to have join with us. So we're glad that you're here today. And Corey, let's get started, man, with our probably, I would arguably, equally one of our favorite parts of this, where we just get to talk about different stuff. So, brother, what's been cooking?
Well, really not much lately. We've been in a phase where we're just it seems like running and we're just grabbing stuff to go right now. So we haven't been doing a whole lot of cooking since last week. We've eaten out at a few good places. There's a really good restaurant north of us. It's some Brothers in Christ own called Southern Reds. I may have talked about it before, but it's pretty larping. We went there the other night, Mother's Day Eve, and it was packed, of course, but it's a barbecue it's actually a really old, like the country gas stations that had a little mini grocery store in it. In the back had a meat counter. You could get a bologna sandwich in or whatever. That's what it was. It's a block building. You pull up, if you ever come visit us here and I take you to it, we're going to pull up in front. You're going to go, this is where we're eating, But it's an old block building. The old wood floors look like they've been walked on for 100 years because they've been walked on for 100 years.
Yep.
But you talking about good food. I mean, everything there is good, and the ribs are good, the steak is good, the whole 9 yards. And,
the hole-in-the-wall places that you go to and you're like, this is a little sketchy. They, a lot of times, have the best food. No question
and
about it.
It's out in the middle of nowhere between Pilot Oak, Kentucky and Water Valley, Kentucky, and you've never heard of either one of those towns because they're just wide spots in the road, and this is in the middle of the wide spots, so it's nothing, But it's really good. And then, of course, last night we got to watch our local Blake Stoker. I don't know if did you watch the barbecue brawl on the Food Network?
No.
I don't know if you watch that or not. But Blake Stoker, that runs Blake's here, that I talk about all the time, he's one of the contestants on it this year. And so last night was the first episode of that. So we're rooting on. Not often a guy from Martin, Tennessee gets to be on a Food Network show.
Yeah. So I may have to check that out. Sorry, somebody's calling me here.
Hello?
Hello? Yeah. We'll edit that one out.
We may have had our first live-in call on Untied.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who that is. And
hello, caller. You're on the air.
It's a sports team in Oklahoma City. They're calling to trying to get us to buy tickets. I've seen that number several times. But
you're live on the air with Garrett and Corey.
Yeah.
On 109.9, counting down the hits in the morning. Go ahead, caller.
Oh, if I could bring them into the podcast and be able to do that, we could really mess with some people.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Now let's go live to the weather chopper up in the air. How's it look up there, Garrett?
Well,
it's
It looks like there's a chance of rain out here. There's one single cloud about 8 miles away. It's really small, but it's going to build. I can feel it.
Yep. Up next, Garth Brooks and the Dance on 109.9 with Good Times in the Morning. Garrett and Corey. We'll be right back after this.
Oh, we may get a call after this. Some radio station may say, we'd like to offer y'all a job. Big time, all over the world.
1-888 we are nuts. That's 1-888-5 we are. I don't know.
Oh, you make shirts out of that. It's not A-R-E. It's just a big R.
Yeah,
we are nuts.
We are nuts.
Oh man. Well, that salad that you mentioned last week? Do you remember that salad had to do with grease and I'm trying to think what it was. Huh?
Yeah. Bacon grease salad at Rafferty's.
Yeah. So my uncle, he called me after he had watched the episode, and he was telling me, he was like, "Do you remember when we used to have that? My grandpa had a big garden in the backyard, and I remember going out and working in it and everything. But anyway, there were several who were real big on grease salad, and he in fact made a comment. He said grease salad is the best salad ever. So I don't remember eating it. I'm maybe I do, but I don't.
Your arteries do though.
Huh?
Your arteries do though.
They might. Yeah, they may still be feeling the effects of it for sure. But he went on about it. He was like, "That was so great," and of course we haven't had it in a very long time. But there was a group, and I guess it's the best on fresh lettuce. But I looked it up on YouTube and saw how to make it and whatnot, and so even a few people around here, they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember. I've had it before." So
when you go to Rafferty's, just get the chef salad, and when they ask you what kind of dressing, just tell them I want I forget what it's called, honey mustard bacon grease or something like that. Bacon, honey mustard, something like that. And you literally get the little bowl like the dressings come in. Mm-hmm. One is going to be honey mustard, and you're going to get another one that it's just, I promise you, all it is bacon grease that they've run through a strainer to get the little bits out.
That's what Greg was saying. He said you would just cook the bacon, crisp it up real good, and then, of course, take it off and crumble it up for the salad or whatever. But that's it. It's just the bacon grease, and you pour it on there real hot, and I guess it sizzles up. But they didn't do
kind of wilt down the lettuce too.
Yeah. So I don't know. May have to have a good healthy week, and then give it a shot.
Well, yeah. Of course, bacon grease makes everything taste better.
That's true.
It just does.
It's very true.
Also, did you know that today, now we're recording this on Tuesday, but did you know that today is National Limerick Day?
Limerick Day? What is that?
You don't know what a limerick is?
I don't know. I don't think so.
A limerick is a type of poem that, like the first two lines rhyme, and then line 3 and 4 rhymes, and then line 5 rhymes with lines 1 and 2.
Gotcha.
So when I sent my morning text out, when I sent out my morning text to my family, I sent them, today is National Limerick Day. So I thought I would text you to say that I love you so, and I want you to know that today is the 12th day of May. So.
And they replied, thanks, Dad.
And they replied, 1-888 we are nuts.
We are nuts. Yeah. Maybe they're just replacing that dad are nuts.
Yeah. Dad be nuts. Mm-hmm. Dad be nut.
Oh, man. Well, no, we were not watching any cooking shows last night, but the boys had the Thunder game on. Thunder and Lakers played last night, so
Yep.
I watched that for a little bit, and of course the Thunder took it, which pretty much knew would happen. So,
By the way, I thought of you the other day. Do you ever look at the Babylon Bee?
mm-hmm.
They had one the other day. Did you see it about the Oklahoma City Thunder?
No, I didn't.
Do you know when you drive by it down the road and those things that they'll put out in front of like a car lot, that airs up? It's the little thing that like a tube that goes up and down, and whatever,
kind of dances and all that. Yep.
Yeah. The headline was Oklahoma City Thunder inserts, and it had a picture of the starting five, but one of the starting five was one of those. It says Oklahoma City Thunder installs automatic flopping air up gas so they can draw even more fouls.
Oh man, I'm looking through here to see if I can find it. Oh, that's funny.
I love the bee.
There's a lot of funny stuff on here.
Yep, they are equal opportunity offenders.
Here's one. Husband patiently waits until after midnight on Mother's Day to ask wife to change kid's diaper. Perfect.
Yeah, they're hilarious. Yeah, I don't know who it is that is behind all of that, but if you don't know, it's satire, so don't get there and get your feelings hurt or anything, but they'll make fun of Democrats and they make fun of Republicans, and they have a lot of Bible-based stuff on there that is, I think, really funny. I know right around Easter especially, they had I'm talking gold stuff. It was hilarious. Like one of them, and I'm paraphrasing exactly what it was, but it's something to the effect of disciples on Friday and Saturday sit in a room by themselves wondering what Jesus meant by after 3 days I will arise, something like that. They make fun of Bible characters. They'll make fun of you name it. They will.
Yeah.
But it's good. But it's all satire, so I saw one of the day, like if you grew up in the 80s when I did, and you really wanted your mom and daddy to get you the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier that was 6 foot long for Christmas, and you never got it because it was $120, and even though now it's worth like $7,500, it would have been the best investment they ever made.
Yeah.
But they had one the other day that something like theologians now believe that everyone will get their own G.I. Joe aircraft carrier once they get to heaven or something like that.
Here's one that I'm just going through here. There's so many funny ones. But here's one that if you're a younger family where your kids are starting to play sports, especially baseball, it's got a kid out in the baseball field, and he's sitting there with a confused look, and it says, "Kid at a baseball game, unsure whether fans are cheering for Aiden, Braden, Caden, or Jaden." That is so true.
That's the truth.
That is so true.
They had one the other day. It's been a week, maybe not long, maybe not a week ago. Of course, Mark Hamill, that played Luke Skywalker, is a big proponent of the Democrats. He's very anti-Trump. But they had one the other day that showed him. I guess it's an AI picture that he was on the front of the White House, like leaned up against one of the pillars, like the famous scene at the end of Empire Strikes Back, and Trump is holding his hand out to him, and it was like Trump reveals to Mark Hamill, quote, "I am your father." They're just funny. So don't leave our podcast and go to them right now, but after Untied, you can go look at some Babylon Bee headlines.
Yeah. CDC warns customers that kale is still disgusting. Oh,
yeah, there was
man.
one of the day before yesterday, I think. Dr. Fauci says he's been working on hantavirus vaccine this whole time or something like that. I mean,
oh, man.
There was one of the day about John finishing up, maybe that was yesterday or the day before, John finishing up Revelation writes, that couldn't be more clear. Politics, religion, culture, what's going on in culture and society. I mean, they're pretty sharp, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Anywho.
These are really funny. Of course, the more I look at these or see these, the more that I'd get other little videos or whatever for different funny Bible things. And I'll have to find some and play them. You know, sometimes people get a little bit upset about that kind of stuff when you just kind of have fun with it or see the humor in it. I'm not one of those people. I think it's good to laugh, and I think it's good to find humor in some of the stuff. But anyway, I won't go into all that, but there's just so many funny videos that are about biblical things.
I'll tell you another one. There's an Instagram page that's called The Bible is Funny. And they have all kinds of things. But one of the things they'll do sometimes is they'll post a verse or a part of a verse, and above it they'll put something to put it into context. Like the other day on Mother's Day, they had one that was like, mom's getting their phone out to look at anything, and then it says kids, and it had a quote from Mark of, I want to see, you know. So they'll take a Bible verse and they'll take it out of context, which we would not normally approve of. But
yeah.
Or there was one other day, in Philippians 1 where Paul says, what will I choose? I do not know. And it was like wives when the waiter walks up and asks them what they would like. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know, So anyway.
Oh.
Because I don't know if your wife is like this. Melody will look at she will read the menu like she's never been to a restaurant before. The same restaurant that we go to over and over and over again. And I don't know what I'm going to get. And then she ends up ordering the same thing she's gotten the previous 27 times we were there.
Yeah.
And I think she's probably standing at my door looking at me now, but I'm not going to look at the door.
Oh, man. That's funny.
Anyway. That's 1-888. We are nuts.
Here's one. Talk about funny Bible stories. This is Babylon Bee. It says, disciples casually ask kid with fish and loaves if his mom could pack wings and nachos next time.
I didn't see that one.
Oh, man. That's great. That's a good one.
Pass that one along to Dan R.O. and he'll like that when he teaches John next time.
I'll have to share this with you. This is, oh man, you just keep going through here and it just gets better and better. Oh my goodness. Let's see. All right, I'm sending this to you now while I'm thinking about it. There you go. Oh man, we could go down that rabbit hole for quite a while.
Long time.
Long time. It's good to laugh about that stuff. Yeah. Anyway,
yes.
Well, summer is approaching very fast. We have graduation on Friday. Yeah. We only had one senior here at Hydro this year, and so we celebrated him last Sunday. And so I'm sure you've got several graduations going on around your area. So if you're tuning in and you have a senior in college or high school that's graduating, we sure want to wish them a congratulations. And of course, last week we did wish everybody a happy Mother's Day, and now we're just right past it when we're recording this. So, of course, we want to, again, wish everybody, hope that you had a great Mother's Day. We very much appreciate you.
Yeah, we just had our graduation from the University of Tennessee at Martin, and all of our college kids here that we love so much at Martin Church of Christ are back home for the summer. We miss them during the summertime. And this weekend is graduation around here, high school graduations. And so this Sunday will be our senior appreciation deal after our worship service this coming Sunday morning here at Martin. And then we've got our Valley graduation will be Saturday. As well, but we actually won't be here. We got our scheduling mixed up, but I'll be in West Virginia. If you're a West Virginian that listens in, I'll be at the Danville Church of Christ starting this Sunday, the 17th. I'll be there Sunday through Wednesday holding a gospel meeting on evangelism. Brandon Blankenship is the preacher there, and Brandon is a good friend of mine, and a great Bible student, and also a big sports fan. So we have a lot in common that we get to talk about together. But anyway, I'll be there at the Danville Church of Christ this week from Sunday through Wednesday. So hope if you're in that part of the world that you'll drive over and visit with us and let us know that you listen to Untied. We'd like to, maybe we can get some pictures with some listeners that we can put on the
That'd be
podcast
awesome.
or something. I don't know.
That would be awesome.
Anyway.
Well, I know that's going to be a great event this weekend. And if you're around that area, be sure to check that out. Corey does a great job in everything that he does, and I know that he'll bless you tremendously. So, good deal. Well, I'll be praying, of course, for your travels. Is Miss Melody going with you?
She's going with me.
Good.
Gannon's going to stay here with his grandparents and continue his mowing job while we're gone. So it'll be a good little getaway for me and Melody. And we're actually going to, on the way back home, we're going to go up through Kentucky, Lexington, Louisville, over into West Virginia. And then when we come home, we're going to go drop down into North Carolina. And it's not too far out of the way to do that. Go by Mount Airy, North Carolina, which is the home of Andy Griffith. We've gotten to be at a couple times. But this year is in June, is Andy Griffith's 100th birthday. So they're having a big celebration at Mount Airy. We won't be there for that, but we're going to stop by Mount Airy and see some of the sights again. And we love the Andy Griffith show, so we like taking the squad car tour and going by the courthouse and the jail and Andy's home place and the museum and all those kinds of things. So
very cool.
Anyway, it'll be a good little trip for us.
Yeah.
But we're really looking forward to Be the Bridge is the theme of the gospel meeting. How that we can be a bridge for people to Jesus. So hopefully try to make it as practical for everybody, everyday evangelism as we can. So anyway. Excellent.
Well, we've got a big study ahead of us here in Matthew chapter 5. And again, we are in verses 21 through 32, where we're looking at the two topics of anger and lust. And I want to get this pulled up here if you're tuning in with us, and you can see the text as we're going through it. And there's some really neat stuff that, as we kind of consider what's going on here. And of course, we have already been kind of looking through this and everything. But there are a few things that I just want to go ahead and point out. I don't know. Let's just kind of play with this here. We'll just highlight this in a couple of different colors here that I think are pretty important. And if I miss one, Corey, make sure and let me know. I'm just kind of going through here and highlighting these. But it's a phrase, but I say to you, which is very important.
Did you get 22?
Here's 28. I missed that one. I did get 22. 22.
26.
Nope,
26.
there it is. We got 26, 28,
28,
30,
32,
34, 39,
34.
44, and I think that's it.
That's it. On the first phrase.
Yeah. So if you're tuning in, make sure and highlight those or mark those in your Bible. But I say to you, but here's another one that's really important. It's a phrase you have heard. And we find that in verse 21. And we've got 27 here. And we'll tell you why we're doing this. And we did not write this out before. We pretty much just do these as we go.
31, it was also said, but it's the same idea there.
Yeah, it was said. Yeah, here we go.
33.
Yep, there it is right there.
38. 43.
I think that's
it.
That's it. So the two phrases here that we want to mark right off the top of the study here is you have heard and but I say to you. Those are really important. And what we've been trying to do as we have been studying throughout this Sermon on the Mount is we've really tried to establish not only, kind of even pulling from Luke and Mark, we've established that each of the writers have really done an excellent job in sharing with us, of course, being inspired, that Jesus is teaching with authority, as one who has authority. And especially, and as I've stated before, I'm doing a big study on Mark, and I'm preaching through Mark, so a lot of my stuff is naturally going there. But one of the things that I find within Mark is that the idea of how amazed they were. And there's different meanings for really different words being used that have been translated amazed. But one of those, when the paralytic is told to get up and take his bed and go home, the idea of that word is they were kind of overcome and they were, kind of fearful because they've just seen something that's really amazing, but at the same time, they were struck with fear because of the power of what had happened. Another idea of amazement is almost like they've just completely overwhelmed with, they're astonished, essentially. So we have the same things that are going on here in Matthew as the results of the things that Jesus is doing and that he's teaching is leaving people in amazement. And they understand that he is one who teaches with authority, which is so different from the scribes and the Pharisees, who were essentially just teaching what so-and-so has said, this rabbi or that rabbi. I don't know if we've talked about the Mishnah or if we've talked about anything like that. I can't remember. But those are different rabbinical teachings that we can read now. But there would have been different writings then that they would have taken from and essentially quoted from those rabbis. And so the idea of tradition and the different rules that they had established and the things that they were teaching throughout their own interpretations were being greatly shared amongst all the people. And so that kind of brings us down to where we are, as Jesus has just said in Matthew 5:18, for truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. So last week we talked about the fact that Jesus is really drawing the attention back to Scripture and the importance of it, and now is going to go into several other things. And these phrases are essentially telling a story here, and of course we'll get into that here in just a moment.
Yeah, and of course, last week we ended up with what we're calling the thesis of the sermon, verse 20, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you'll not enter the kingdom of heaven, which, as we talked about last week, would have been a jaw dropper for them. Well, here's like the first segment of the body of the sermon that kind of proves that. This from here down to the end of chapter 5 are these 6 contrasts of the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, what they're teaching, versus the righteousness of God, true righteousness. And, you have heard, this is what, as you said, what the Pharisees and scribes were teaching. Sometimes it was parts of the old law. Sometimes it was taken out of context. Sometimes it was a little bit of opinion mixed in there, which is what kind of the Mishnah was, like commentaries on the old law that the rabbis wrote. But I say to you, and that's the what Jesus says is really what it's all about. And so, anyway, this back and forth of, you can go by what the scribes and Pharisees say, their opinion, but that's not really what matters. And when they taught, they would teach, as you said, Rabbi Ben Joseph says, X, Y, Z. And the more of those that they could quote, the more authority they seem to have. But Jesus doesn't quote anybody. He just says, but I say to you. And that's enough. Mm-hmm. Kind of like later on in Matthew, whenever, God tells them at the Mount of Transfiguration, hear ye him. Jesus is the authority, not what anybody else says. So, anyway.
Well, and here's something else, and I really think that this should connect to us very clearly, I would think, is that as Jesus is preaching this sermon, you have all kinds of people who are listening to this. And as we've stated before, we don't think that Jesus just taught this sermon one time and that was it. He was traveling around and he was teaching these very things. So you would have had his disciples, which are, a group of people who are following him. This is outside the 12. So you would have had the women there who were, of course, at the cross. They would have been following, others following. And then you have the 12. And of course, we don't have all the 12 yet, but you have, there's a following around. But then you have other common folks that are around that area. And these are the things that he's saying to them. You have heard. So there is a great amount of emphasis that's being placed on the things that they're hearing and not necessarily the things that they're studying. And we ought to be able to connect to that very clearly right up front, that if we are not in the Word and we're not studying the Word, then we're only basing our religious viewpoints, our faith stance, if you will, on the things that we've heard. But Jesus is wanting to draw their attention back to something that's actually concrete. Well, who are we listening to? Are we listening, well, this is what my preacher said. This is what my elder said. This is what my daddy said. This is what Uncle Frank said. This is what, one of these other people on TV, this is what they said. Well, does what they said actually follow and line up with what Scripture says? Because Scripture is what has the authority. Well, Jesus had the authority. The scribes did not. And so he is attacking the things that they have heard, but not necessarily the things that they have read and that they have studied and seen for themselves. And so, this ought to be something that really makes us think in our own personal lives, in our own spiritual walk, not rely on the things that you've heard, but the things that have actually been studied. So that ought to be a clear connection to our own personal life today, making this very, very applicable right off the bat.
Yeah, and I never trusted Uncle Frank anyway, but that's another.
Nobody trusts Uncle Frank.
No. So contrast number 1 is 21 through 26 about anger. And what you're going to see is the Pharisees said, you can get angry all you want, just don't kill nobody. But what Jesus is going to teach is there's these 3 levels of increasing anger, and then he's going to talk about how we need to be proactive in settling disputes and then controlling our tongue and all of that. But it's a different way of handling our anger towards others than what they said. And that's what you're going to see with all these is there's kind of like the Pharisees have kind of dumbed it down a little bit instead of leaving a high standard of morality, of spirituality, or to use the word of the sermon, righteousness. But Jesus is saying God has greater expectations for us than that.
Mm-hmm. Looking at something here. So there, right up here in verse 21, there's always some truth in here. You have heard the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder. Whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. And of course, that's found back in Exodus 20 and verse 13, which is a part of the Ten Commandments. But the liable to the court is from Deuteronomy 16 and verse 18. So the things that they're hearing aren't, like you said, completely wrong. But there are things added to that.
That second part's kind of like Deuteronomy 16:18, but it's not exactly. They kind of have twisted it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So notice what Jesus says in verse 22. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court, and whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court, and whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. Therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. Make friends quickly with your opponent at law while you are with them on the way, so that your opponent may not hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. So there seems to be, Corey, and I'd love to see what you think about this, but there seems to be a big teaching right here on the importance of the relationships that we have with our brethren. And like you said, how we handle our anger and the things that we do with those. And, probably there are several different scriptures that we could attach to this, because this is not the only place that Jesus would deal with something like this. Matthew 18 talks about the idea of forgiveness. John does an excellent job in 1st, 2nd, 3rd John with discussing the fellowship that we have with one another. So this idea of going and working this thing out, be reconciled to your brother before you're doing this offering, seems to be a huge point here.
Yeah, and before he gets to that, though, you start with verse 22, and Jesus has just said what they've talked about is murder. Mm-hmm. But then verse 22, Jesus starts off with anger. So how do you go from murder to anger? Well, it's because their concept of righteousness isn't correct. He's teaching righteousness on another level. You don't start off with murder. It starts off with anger that leads to murder.
Right.
And Jesus says if you're angry with your brother, you're guilty. They said, not till you murder are you guilty, but Jesus is saying, I say when you're angry with your brother, you are. And then if you call your brother good for nothing, or this is where some of the older translations have Raka or Reka or however you pronounce it. So now you're not just getting angry, you're calling them names. Now we joke with one another, but this is not joking. This is very insulting, derogatory terms. You didn't say this in a joke. Like I can joke with you and say, at Garrett Bernethy's, he's a good for nothing, and everybody knows we're kidding but there's some things that I would not call you because they're not joking. Well, that's what this is. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, he says, then you're going to go before the Supreme Court, the New American Standard says. It's the Sanhedrin is, what he's talking about here. And they had the power to stone you if they thought that your potty mouth was too bad. Or then, here's the third level. Now you're calling him a fool. And this is not like Fred Sanford saying, you old fish-eye fool or something like that. This was, like biblically speaking, it's talking about their spiritual character. You go back to, again, the wisdom literature. the opposite of the wise is the fool, and that's the person who has no interest in spiritual things or following God or whatever. And he says that person's going to go into the fiery hell. So we ain't even got to murder yet. We're just talking about uncontrolled anger, where you're making spiritual judgments to someone else. And how quickly do we do that, by the way? We get so upset with somebody, we make spiritual judgments about them. He says that's going to cost you your soul. And chapter 7, when we get over there to the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he's going to talk even more about that. But that's where it's got to start. We've got to control ourselves before we can ever have the right kind of relationship with each other.
Yeah. So essentially what we're getting at is these levels of how, these stages, if you will, of anger. And all of us deal with this. So you have this, whatever it is, if we're making a modern day application, something happens and it frustrates you. Well, the more that you stew on that, the more you have this silent type of anger, this internal anger that begins to grow. And at some point, it's got to come out. It's going to come out. And so you have these, like you said, you fool, whatever, you good for nothing. So you have this speech that's now directed toward them and is really hateful, and as it is directed, but it's all built on this seed that was planted when you didn't deal with it in the first place, and then you have this, then you approach the entire situation, you make it completely, more than it actually was. And of course, that creates a huge problem. So I have here written silent anger, railing speech, and bitter approach. Those are three things that I've got written here. I want to say those came from Denny Petrillo, but I can't remember. But that's kind of how these are, this is building here. And of course, it leads to something that is terrible. This anger begins to burn, it begins to grow, and the results of that is never a good thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of what he's getting to. How'd you go from murder to anger? Is because with all these things, Jesus is going to show the Pharisees, it was more about what you do, not what the condition of your heart is. Jesus is saying what you do begins in your heart, and that's what really matters. So instead, what he says, as you pointed out, verses 23 and 24, you need to be proactive. And now what we typically do is you do something bad, and I say, well, Garrett can come crawling to me if he wants to make. That's not what it's. If Garrett offends me, I need to go to Garrett, in part because I understand the importance of this, but also because you may not know you offended me. See?
Right.
So I need to be proactive and go to you and settle those disputes. Okay. So to what degree, if you go before the altar to worship God, hard for us to think about it this way, but Jesus is saying there's some things that are more important than worship. It's better to make resolution with your brother than to worship, which again, like you talked about, goes to 1 John chapter 4. How can we say we love God, which is what we're doing in worship, whom we have not seen, when we don't love our brother sitting down the pew from us, whom we can see? Mm-hmm. So now, you're the one that with the problem. Okay. He did something to you, but you're the one with the problem. So you've got to, well, he did it, so he ought to come. No, you ought to be proactive and fix things. That's what true righteousness does. Because I want to make sure that my relationship with you is what it should be. That's what a truly righteous man will do, is try to make amends with my brother, make sure our relationship is right so we can both be right with God.
Yeah, because our relationship with God and each other is contingent upon our relationship with God and each other. And that's
and he's going to later on in the Sermon on the Mount talk about if you don't forgive your brother, don't ask God to forgive you, because he ain't going to.
Yeah. So like you said, that this is truly a look at the heart, that righteousness is not something that's seen from the outside in, but from the inside out. And several things that Jesus does throughout his these 3 years of his life are very heavily pointed to that direction. If we remember the fig tree, and you come up over this hill and you got the fig tree, and then you've got the temple in the background, and then he curses the fig tree because it's not producing any figs, and then you come back. Well, how was the tree rotting? How was it, I guess rotting and deteriorating? It was from the roots up, not from the top down, as typically happens. And so there's a lot of things that Jesus does that points to that idea of the heart. And this is definitely one of those places that does the same thing.
Yeah. And then these last two verses, he's talking about how you need to control your own tongue. So think about we don't think about it in terms of what they would, but in their day and time, all roads lead to Rome. You've probably heard that before. Well, in the Palestinian area, all roads led to Jerusalem. There was only a few roads that did lead to Jerusalem. So if you and I have something between us, okay, I've done something wrong to you, and instead of working it out, we end up going to court for it, okay? As we're walking to Jerusalem for our court date, there's a pretty good chance, since we both live in the same village, that as we're walking to Jerusalem, we're on the same road together. So the rabbis would say that's a good time to let that guy know how you felt about him. You sorry, good-for-nothing Garrett. I can't believe you're bringing me to court, But instead, Jesus says, make friends with him. Well, that's different. Yeah, that's 180 degrees on the other side of the coin, see? If I'm kicking and screaming and calling names, guess what you're going to do to me when you get me in front of the judge? You're going to say, throw the book at him, right? Let him have it. But the Jewish court system wasn't based on time. It was based on when you could pay it off. So if I had something like the alt you had against me was I'd accidentally killed your prize oxen or whatever, I didn't get 2 years in jail for that. I got the number of years in jail that it took for me to pay off that oxen that I killed. Okay? Well, while I'm in jail, I literally have no way of making money in ancient times. I couldn't, we weren't making license plates for the chariots or anything that I could make 4 cents a day with. So that meant, basically, unless I had a rich uncle, what was the uncle we talked about a while ago we didn't trust?
Frank. Uncle Frank.
Yeah. Unless Uncle Frank was rich and wanted to come pay it off for me, what that meant was I would get a life sentence for killing your ox. So what Jesus is saying, all you had to do was control your brain and your tongue and make amends on the road, and it never would have got to court, and you never would have got thrown in prison because hey, Garrett, we don't have to go to court over this. You and me, we're men of integrity. I'll pay you back, whatever. And But see, all of this is about anger. It's about a new righteousness. What the rabbis were doing were actually the Pharisees were encouraging anger. And Jesus saying, if you're a really righteous person, you're going to go way beyond that to forgive and work things out. Not only is it better for everybody, it's really better for you, but you're doing it because, not just to get out of jail, but you're doing it because that's what a righteous person does.
Yeah, while you're talking there, I couldn't help but think about, James chapter 3, and there's a few things going on, but in James 3, James really, of course, James being the brother of Jesus, he's discussing the idea of the tongue, and you have the illustrations of the ship and the rudder and the horse and the bit and all that kind of stuff, and I've thought about that a lot, and I've studied that several times, and then we even did a workshop over James, which was great for me. But the idea of actually thinking about what your actions are and not allowing your emotions to get the best of you is really important. So is it really about the bit? Is it really about the udder? No, it's not. It's about who's controlling the bit and about who's controlling the udder. Or the rudder, not the udder, the rudder.
Controlling the udder is important if you've ever milked a cow.
It is, yeah. Controlling that too. But it really is about the direction you want to go. The horse is going to go where the rider wants him to go. The ship is going to go where the captain wants it to go. And this is about being intentional. It's about thinking. It's about being purposeful. It's about you just making these intentional decisions based off of fact and truth and what's right, and not being ruled by something that's unstable and changing by the moment. And that's what our emotions do. And when we allow that seed to grow, it can create these huge barriers and walls with our brethren that should never be created. And
right.
And the reality is that in a lot of situations, you have church splits, you've got divisions of all kind, that a majority of these, I would say probably 90% of these, and I don't know what the actual facts are about, church splits and all this kind of stuff, but I would say that probably 80 to 90% of all of these have nothing to do with Scripture. They have everything to do with our own opinion and our emotions. And if we would just work it out, maybe you don't agree. I don't know that there's any sinful behavior that comes from just simply not agreeing, because we all don't agree on everything. But if you would work together to try and reach a point where you can come to an agreement, look how much you have saved. Yeah. Because the reality is, and I understand that there's a lot being said here, but when we're talking about fellowship of the church and of relationships, when we think about church splits and family splits and all that, it doesn't just affect you. It affects the generations after you. And I do, and somebody may not agree with that. That's fine. But I can show you proof after proof after proof where the generations after are affected by that one event, whether they were directly involved or not. It just does. But when you have a group of people who can come together and figure it out, that can affect generations too in a very positive way.
Yeah. And as we've talked about before, and again, I'm not saying being right doctrinally is not important, but there's ways to go about it. Right. We want to look, I'm in the right, and not handle it the right way. If I can be in the right doctrinally, not handle it in the right way, and still not be in the right then, But as we've talked about before, there's probably nothing in the New Testament that's written about more than getting along with each other. Almost every epistle in the New Testament is talking about brethren that aren't getting along with each other for whatever reason. And yes, you got to stand up for truth, but part of being righteous isn't just truth, it's about speaking the truth in love. Is our goal to be right or to prove somebody wrong, or is our goal to try to bring us together in unity under Christ? That's a more important thing.
Well, in 1 Corinthians 8 through 10 is essentially about that very thing. Just because you have the right to do something doesn't make it right to do. Or if we think about Romans 15, that we who are strong ought to bear the weakness of those without strength, and not just please ourselves. Each of us is to please his neighbor for his good, his edification. This is what Jesus did. Now, who's the weak and who's the strong? Well, the weak in this case are the Jews, and the strong are the Gentile. And you might just think running through this that it might be opposite, but it's not. And the same thing that's going on here in Romans.
The Jews definitely thought it was the opposite.
Yeah. And I mean, Paul in Romans is throwing punch after punch after, both groups, but the Jews are sitting there thinking he's talking about somebody else. But 1 Corinthians 8 through 10, I think is just such a powerful thing. And again, it's about the eating of meat. It's about, several different things. But the overall emphasis is just because you may have the right to do something doesn't make it right to do. And I can take the truth and drive somebody away from Jesus just as easy as I can take the truth and bring somebody to them and say the exact same thing, but in a different way. Yeah. So anytime the gospel is shared in a dogmatic, hateful way, man, we're doing, it's just, such a bad thing to do. You know, people are, you know, I don't know, that we could probably go on about that for days, but it's so important to, you know, Philippians chapter 2, we're putting on the mind of Christ. And if we're being of the same love and same encouragement and all that stuff that's said down to through verse 8, that is how you share the gospel. That's how you treat each other. That's how you work in this, you know, that's how you work in kingdom work, is like Jesus did. And, well, Jesus got upset. Yeah, he did get upset a few times. He overthrew the tables. That shows that he's mad. I can be mad. Yeah, but why did he do that? And was it an uncontrolled anger? No, he had good reason for doing exactly what he did. And we can't use those things for how we want to use them.
And one of the main differences in us and Jesus too is John 2 tells us no one had to tell Jesus what was in the heart of men, because he knew it was in the heart of men.
Yeah. Jesus
knew whether someone was just being, you know, bowing up and trying to stand against him, or whether they were just mistaken, which that's two different things. We don't. And so if we want grace shown to us when we're mistaken and not just being, you know, stiff-necked, then we got to give grace to others, because we don't know what people are thinking. We might think we know, but we don't know. And so, you know, going back to Romans 15, you were quoting a few minutes ago, he also says, Romans 15, to welcome one another or accept one another as Christ has accepted you for the glory of God. Well, how has Christ accepted me? I'm not perfect and I make mistakes, but he's extended grace and love and mercy to me, and we need to do that with each other as well. So, you know, but it all starts in the mind. No one sets out like, you know, I think I'm going to find somebody I can murder today. But what happens is that, and most of us would never think about murdering someone. But how many of us have held a grudge against someone in our hearts? Jesus says the righteous don't do that even. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you have a timer that you're keeping up with how long we've been going?
Yeah, we're at 56 minutes, so we're approaching our time limit.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask. It felt like that, but I forgot to start my timer, so I didn't know if we had time to get into contrast number 2. So we're not going to get into that.
Yeah, we'll probably save that for next week, yeah.
All right, so let me ask you this, and that'll be fine, because the third contrast is just 2 verses, so it won't take us as long to get through that one. But let me ask you this, as a distinguished minister of the gospel as you are, what are some practical ways that we can build unity? Now, we're going to have problems with each other. We're going to have times we don't get along. We're not going to see things. What are some practical ways that we can make sure that we're not allowing ourselves to be divided by issues, but rather we work them out like we should?
Man, that's a great question. You know, one of the things that I have found that is really important is, this could be a long list that we could both put together. Spending time with one another. We already said we only
got 3 minutes, so
I know,
we only got 3 minutes.
Spending time with one another.
Think Wednesday night devotional, not Sunday evening, you know.
Yeah. So
spending time with
mine
each
are
other.
30 minutes on Wednesday night. What is your No, you know, spending time with one another is a very big deal. The more you spend time with one another, the more you get used to one another. Keeping those doors open, those, you know, to each other and being involved in each other's life is a good deal. I have found, and I'm sure you have too, and I'm no expert on any of this, so I'm just, you know, recalling some of this from my experience. But it seems that hardships, trials, and controversy really begin to show their ugly face when you're not together. When communication stops, that's when everything begins to happen. So the more you do together, the better. The more you communicate to one another, the better. You can be together and not communicate. So these are 2 separate things. So communication needs to be always happening in one way or another, that you're constantly, when communication stops, problems start. And the way that you communicate is important. The things that you communicate is important. Well, if I'm always talking, you and I are always talking, a few times a week, and we kind of know what's going on with one another. But when two people in a congregation, they stop really kind of talking to one another, and something happens, and one might be involved in one way or another. Maybe they're not, but they're associated. Well, now the mind begins to try to connect things it doesn't know, which is a natural thing that the mind does, and stories begin to grow. If you don't communicate and ask questions and talk about things, then there are things that can grow out of that situation. So being together, doing things together, communicating, those are very, very important. They're three different things. They're not all the same. Studying and talking Bible together. That is such a huge thing. If you really want to build a spiritual relationship with someone, talk Bible together. Talk about the things you agree with, the things that you don't agree with, that you don't agree on. Just talk Bible. You're not coming there with a preconceived idea. You're not coming there to push an agenda. You're not coming there to change their mind. You're just talking about things, And
hey, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
The other thing that does too is, like, sometimes we're guilty. Well, Garrett just thinks that because he don't know his Bible. But if we study with each other, what we find is, no, Garrett has based that decision or that conclusion on some pretty good Bible study, and he's got some stuff that he can back. It's maybe not a black and white book, chapter, verse kind of issue,
Sure.
It's not that Garrett doesn't know his Bible, like we are quick to accuse people sometimes. It's just maybe he misunderstood something, or maybe he's got a perspective that I don't have.
Yeah. Or there's something that led, whoever to whatever point. And that could be traditional teaching. It could be what Daddy believed. It could be anything that leads him. But like you said, there are things that it may not be clear, there's a lot of topics that aren't just super clear. And sometimes there are judgments that can be made, opinions that can be had. And we build these opinions on different things that we learn in Scripture within the text. And we're trying to figure it out. And I think that we have got a big problem of not understanding that we're all really trying to figure stuff out. And in some of these instances, we're trying to figure things out that really can't be figured out until later on. But we want to make hard lines saying that we've got it figured out when we really don't. Yep. So I love Dan Owen and Denny Petrillo at the workshop this year. We got done. I may have told you this, but we got done and the snowstorm was coming and all that stuff. So Denny and Dan and several
blizzard of 26.
Yeah. They were all going to be stuck at the hotel for the next few days until everything passed and they could fly home. Well, I was talking to Denny. I said, what are you guys going to do? What are you and Dan going to do? Because they love to hang out. They're best friends. He said, well, I think we're going to get together and we're going to talk about all the stuff that we don't agree on. It was about Romans. We had studied Romans, and that's what they wanted to talk about. The stuff they didn't agree on. Now, I've thought about that. Why? We have a lot of people, well, if we come together and talk about what we don't agree on, that causes friction, causes tension because you don't agree with me. Those two come together and they're like, that's what we want to talk about because we know that that's what helps us to grow. And they're looking at things from different perspectives. And if, a lot of what we're talking about here, what Jesus is talking about, I think has to do with spiritual maturity and wisdom. Because spiritual maturity and wisdom allows you to consider that how things might be different from how things actually are. Mm-hmm. And, so I don't know. I didn't give any of this in list form.
All those things that you're talking about are great. And what they talk about is building real relationships with each other.
Yeah.
That's what it all boils down to, because you don't really have an Uncle Frank, I hope, right?
I don't.
Okay, so Garrett Hatt will say he has an Uncle Frank, and Uncle Frank is known for, he's always, when he gets around somebody younger, he tousles their hair, okay? Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things that is kind of endearing to y'all. Y'all love about Uncle Frank. You know he's going to do that whenever he sees. And then you invite me over to the family barbecue for Memorial Day, and he tousles my hair, and I draw back to punch him. Well, what's the difference? You have a relationship with him. And so you're willing to overlook those things or accommodate those. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That so much of this is what kind of relationship do you have with each other? And, we need to be willing to extend that mercy and grace to people we don't know as well, of course. But one of the best, and this works within the church, within the home, within marriages, within businesses, whatever you want to talk about. The problem is not building real relationships, and that's what we've got to do. But all of that begins with what we're thinking in our heart, and that's what Jesus is trying to do. The Pharisees are actually promoting ideas that are leading to more anger and bad feelings towards people, if not murder. Jesus is saying true righteousness is caring more about others than yourself and working to build those relationships so you don't have those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So if you need to respond to the invitation, we hope that you'll come while we stand
and sing.
Together.
Even our worship, and I know we're winding down here, but there is no part of Christianity that is not connected to relationship or fellowship, which really those are kind of the same thing. But there's no part. Our worship is about our relationships. Think about it whenever we come together to eat the Lord's Supper. That's not a separate meal. That's a together meal. When we are singing praises, we're doing it in unison. Some songs are we lift up to God. Some songs are to encourage one another. Everything about Christianity has to do with fellowship and relationships and love. It makes complete sense when you think about it logically. And Jesus is really wanting to confront that because the Pharisees and the scribes have done a great job at combating that idea and putting other things in people's minds, because they really had become a sect that were more about gaining a following than promoting a following for Jesus, for God, rather. And, during their day. But that's not the point of our life. Our life should be completely about the Lord. It should be dedicated to bringing others to the Lord and helping others throughout this life. There's a great deal of encouragement that should happen, love that should happen. And of course, that starts with what Jesus showed us. So to mimic and be his disciple is to walk like he did, and that's how we do that.
Yep, that's right.
Well, Corey, any closing remarks before we head off of here?
Love one another. Thus saith the Savior.
Oh, man. I really don't like that song.
Children obey.
I remember singing that whenever we were growing up, and I was just like, oh my goodness. Never was a fan of that one. Good message. Whew. Some kind of slow waltz kind of deal.
Yeah. So, here's a limerick for us. Let's try to see if we can do this real quick. You must love one another instead of hate your brother. If you don't want to go, for murder to death row.
Now you got to rhyme with the first one, didn't you?
I know it. I can't think nothing. We'll unlimerick that.
Oh, man. Happy
It starts in the
National
heart.
Limerick Day.
It's also National Nutty Fudge Day, so go do with that what you want to.
There we go. That goes along with the catchphrase, "We are nuts."
It's also National Odometer Day, and since the odometer on old Corey is rolling up high, I better leave the fudge alone today, I'm thinking.
Ooh, there you go. Who comes up with these days?
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, Corey, great study today. I'm loving everything that we're doing and talking about and considering throughout the text. And this is what we hope that you as a listener will do with your friends, your family, the people that you go to church with, which of course are your family as well. And to consider these things and talk about them and grow together in spirit and in love and in knowledge. This is supposed to be a good journey, not a battle journey. As we go throughout our daily walk, truly working together, walking together. No greater blessing can be found than that in the Lord. So anyway, we are so glad that you have joined us today for another episode of this Untied Podcast as we consider life and consider ministry and everything outside and in between. We hope that the study today has been a great blessing for you, and we want to encourage you to continue to go through reading this. Again, this whole section is from chapter 5, verse 21 through verse 32, and we'll tackle the second two contrast next time as we come back next week with another study. Cora will be coming to us from a hotel room, but we'll be okay and get everything rolling and have another great study together. So thank you for joining us today. We hope that this has been a blessing for you. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe if you're enjoying this podcast. Share it with everybody that you know. And if you have anything that any questions or comments or anything, we would love to hear from you and see what your thoughts are as we go throughout this study and how these things have helped you, or maybe even some things to think about. We would love to hear from you. So until next time, we hope that the Lord will continue to bless you in your daily walk with Him, and we hope that you will stay untied.
And we'll end with the hymn that has the same beat as the Atlanta Braves Tomahawk Chop. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love.